It is Friday, May 12th. Let's talk PlayStation. Hello everyone, welcome back to another delectable episode of LTPS. We have some PlayStation rumors to go over, more so than usual, I would say. But we have that alongside our regular news stories, so first, as always, our PS Plus reminder. If you haven't just yet, make sure you claim the PS Plus Essential May games that are live on PSN right now. But more importantly, we have the PS Plus Extra and Premium lineup revealed for what will go live this coming Tuesday on the 16th. And it's one of those things where this lineup is really strong. I think it would be hard to argue otherwise because you've got Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which is such a fantastic modern platformer on PlayStation 5. It's a gorgeous looking, one of the only true next-gen looking games. It really is kind of nutty, but it's also got that classic chaotic Ratchet and Clank gameplay with the guns, and it's also relatively short, something you can do in a weekend, which I always appreciate. But you've got that, and also Humanity, which is launching day and date into PS Plus Extra and Premium. So, and that's also on PS4, 5, PSVR 1 and 2. So, a little something there for any PlayStation owner. But there's also Dishonored. You've got the Tomb Raider games on there, The Evil Within 2, Thymesia, Lake. I mean, there's just it's a really diverse lineup, so really strong showing for PS Plus Extra this month, and then for PS Plus Premium, kind of the same thing we normally see, not a lot of titles, but it's yet again Ben Studio showing up with them pulling weight on this service. So you've got Siphon Filter Logan Shadow, again the PSP game. It's mostly PSP with Blade Dancer Lineage of Light, which is that's actually pretty cool to see, but also Pursuit Force, a classic PSP title for sure. I feel like a lot of people had that one, but you've got that, and also the one lone PS3 remaster, which is a native PS4 game, so you don't have to stream it, but it's Ghostbusters, the video game remastered. I am still waiting patiently for Resistance Retribution, so I'm sure it'll come eventually since they're clearly working through all the Siphon Filter games, but, you know, Premium is still kind of doing its own thing. Extra, though, yeah, really good lineup for sure. I think there's a little something there for everyone. Now, moving on to our first news story. This one we're a little bit late on because it came out a few hours after LTPS last week, but Sony is closing their smallest PlayStation studio, PixelOpus. We learned about this from the official Twitter account where PixelOpus says, and I quote here, "Dear friends, our PixelOpus adventure has come to an end. As we look to new futures, we wanted to say a heartfelt thank you to the millions of passionate players who have supported us, and our mission to make beautiful, imaginative games with heart. We are so grateful." In a follow-up statement to IGN, Sony did confirm that PixelOpus will close on June 2nd. Now, like I said, PixelOpus was Sony's smallest studio. They actually made that studio back in 2011, 2012, where they had this internal incubation program. They brought in a bunch of Carnegie Mellon University students, and it was like a 10-person team that went on to ship Entwined on PS4 in 2014, and then eventually it got PS3 and Vita versions. But, you know, they grew, nothing crazy, but enough to where they then shipped Concrete Genie on PS4, played that during the 30 Platinums Part 2 video. That game is so fun, cute, wonderful, gorgeous art direction, and so I'll always recommend people play that game. But, you know, you had those two games, and we had recent job listings telling us that their next game was a PlayStation 5 title made in Unreal Engine 5 in collaboration with Sony Pictures Animation. So based on hearing that and also what they did before, seemed very exciting that they were doing something really cool and unique again. And I think it was like, back in September of last year where we did a video discussing how Sony's developers may not be ready to talk about things and do a showcase. And that's where we are now, where we should be close to a showcase. But back then I was like, oh, you know, PixelOpus, rather, they are, you know, at the time it was like a 2-year dev cycle. Now we're on year 3, but it's like, okay, they might be ready to show this game off next year or something like that, right? But we always say those things under the assumption that the development timeline is going well. That's not always the case. And so publishers, if you know, their progress and the build isn't going well, they'll shut the project down, of course, before they spend any more money. But the unfortunate news is that they did that alongside just closing the studio down in general. Now, it seems very obvious that, yes, Sony is going in this direction where they're prioritizing their portfolio and their production pipeline to accommodate projects that are of a much larger budget. both games as a service, yes, but still single-player games. I don't know why people harp on the live service stuff so much. They still have plenty of single-player games in development, but there's still big budgets across the board, right? And I would agree. You know, I'm definitely in that mind of I miss when Sony themselves were directly funding these creative properties and IP that may not have catered to a large audience, right? But, you know, they had these internal studios that were on the smaller side, putting out these quirky, unique games, and I do miss all that stuff. But here's the weird thing, right? Because we can't ignore that Sony is still taking care of that niche and filling that role in their portfolio. They're just not doing it internally anymore, which I think is the thing people are harping on a lot, right? Because even during the PlayStation 5 cycle, you know, they've collaborated a lot with smaller teams and independent studios when it comes to launching things on PS Plus or marketing rights or timed exclusivity or giving these games just some kind of voice on the PlayStation blog. You know, we're talking about games like Stray, Sifu, Humanity, Chia, Cult of the Lamb. I mean, they've done a lot of these kinds of games, which I would categorize those in the same sort of vein of like the prior Japan Studio titles, PixelOpus, even things like Big Studios or Studio Liverpool, Zipper Interactive, Gorilla Cambridge. I mean, a lot of them, they were doing Vita stuff near the end there, which, you know, is quite small in relation to the PS4 stuff, but the point still stands that, you know, they were doing things that were speaking to a smaller audience, and Sony still very much, you know, fills in that gap in their portfolio. They just do it in a different way now, leaning into external studios rather than doing them all in-house. Now, I still think there's a lot of value to doing these things internally. That's how I would prefer it, but it's not like we don't still have those games. So really depends on your perception of just how they go about getting to what seems to be the same result. But having said that, this is one of those unfortunate, harsh realities of the video game business, is that sometimes studios are going to get closed and people are going to be, you know, out of a job. But hopefully everybody at PixelOpus does land back on their feet again very soon. Now, moving on to a somewhat related news story here, if this is to be believed. For now, we'll just label it a rumor, but apparently Sony has also canceled a AAA PvP sci-fi type shooter for PlayStation 5 and PC from Final Strike Games. This is coming from the Twitter account at BogoRad222, where they make this claim that the game was due to come out in about 2 years, and that their source is a developer who was recently laid off from the studio after what was a 40% reduction in the total headcount due to the cancellation of this game. Now, they provided this evidence to Tom Henderson, writing for InsiderGaming.com, where Tom doesn't necessarily corroborate the story, but it seems like seeing the evidence, he felt good enough about publishing this as a story on his site, so he says more or less the same thing on there. But just for background, you know, First Strike Games, they were founded in 2016. They shipped one game called Rocket Arena, and since then they were doing support work for Epic Games on Fortnite. And the only thing we do know officially is that they did have a project that they were working on that they labeled a unannounced AAA new IP PvP shooter for PC and console. That's really all we know. So it's certainly plausible that maybe Sony was the one funding this project, especially given that we do have PixelOpus officially being shut down, right? So it could have been part of a routine portfolio overview on all the projects that you're funding, so not just internal studios, but external ones as well. So checking in on every studio, seeing the progress, the ones that are not making any sort of meaningful, work towards a direction of maybe a viable product that they want to ship, then they'll pull the plug on those things. And so that could have been the case here, but I'm not sure there's much more that we can really say, because this happens a lot more often than you would think behind the scenes. So for now, we'll just have to leave it there. Now, in a much more uplifting news story, which is in direct contrast to the PixelOpus story, Sony also recently announced the India Hero Project, which is much like the China Hero Project. It's an incubation program where developers of that region can apply, and as long as they're a a registered entity, they can be accepted. It doesn't matter if they're big, small, but if they are accepted into the program, then they could get funding from Sony, marketing opportunities, mentorships, access to Sony's resources, or even get their game published by Sony themselves directly, which is really cool because we saw a lot of great stuff come out of the China Hero project. The kind of games where not only are they good, but you might have actually bought some and played them without realizing they came out of that program. So we've seen the industry do this in recent years, which is, really finally giving these areas the support and funding that they need and scouting out this talent, because there is so much out there. Sean Layden was even talking about this a few years ago, where in terms of the global outreach, a lot more needs to be done to, find these developers and give them the support they need to finally get these projects out there. I know there's also a pretty big independent development community in South America too, I believe. And so whether it's, South America, China, India, there's a lot of places that could really use some of this help from a big publisher like Sony. So I love seeing this stuff because that means we can keep our eyes on this program and then in 2-3 years maybe see something really special come out. Next up, in celebration for Guerrilla Games' 20th anniversary, we found out on the PlayStation blog just how big the Horizon franchise really is, because the total units sold across all games is 32.7 million units. And more interestingly, we finally got some confirmed numbers for Horizon Forbidden West, where across PS4 and PS5 it sold 8.4 million copies as of April 16th. And that's not counting the PlayStation Plus downloads or the Play at Home program, where there's millions of more players that have played the franchise from, by those means, right? But big numbers for the Horizon IP. I love the universe. I love the characters. I'm so into it. My only complaint is that as of right now, it does seem like Guerrilla is completely all in on the Horizon franchise. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I would like them to do a new IP alongside Horizon. But either way, I'm still totally into it, so that's great to see, especially because, Killzone, as much as I enjoyed it, it was time for them to try out something new, and it's always a little bit scary when you try out a big, new, bold project, which they talk about on the PlayStation blog, and they also more or less tease the third entry again, but I'm happy for Guerrilla and how far they've come with this universe that they've built. Congratulations. Now, as we get closer to that late May, early June time frame, the PlayStation Showcase rumors are not letting up at all. So this past week, we had Andy Robinson of Video Games Chronicle mention that they've recently heard about the showcase happening in the late May, early June window, with Konami stuff included, which, if you remember, Konami originally confirmed they would be at E3 until they eventually pulled out. And at the time when E3 was canceled, Andy did theorize that they might just show up at Sony's event, which is completely plausible, seeing as how they were going to be at something to announce something, and that something being was MGS3, the MGS3 remake by Virtuos, or they could possibly just, show up and discuss more details on the lineup of Silent Hill games, and also the IP that we know the least about in terms of its revival, which would be Castlevania. Anyway, we also had Giant Bomb's Jeff Grubb basically give us a more direct window where he says the showcase should be the week of May 25th. Not saying directly what day, but I would be pretty surprised if it was not falling directly on May 25th. It seems like the kind of day that Sony would pick, but then again, Sony is very hard to predict nowadays. And also, on the flip side, we do have Sony confirmed as a partner for the Summer Game Fest, which I don't think that's really all too surprising either, given that they always bring a few things to a Jeff Keighley event. So we can expect the showcase soon, hopefully, and then something at the Summer Game Fest live stream. Probably Death Stranding 2 is where that'll show up. That's just a off-the-cuff guess. But, there's not much more that needs to be said. I think we're getting very close to that eventual announcement, and now it's still going to have to get very close, but we'll have a few day notice for sure. That's how Sony's been doing it with what are bigger live streams that they want to generate more buzz around. So I'm sure we'll find out within, we'll have like a 4 or 5 day window or something. Now, another rumor that we're going to touch on, and you might want to buckle up for this one because we're going to be driving over a bunch of dead horses, It's the Bloodborne Remake Remaster rumor. And I only mention this because there was kind of a thing that happened recently, a drama, if you will, nothing big, but we'll provide some context on what happened if you saw this. So David Jaffe, the creator of the God of War series, who now does a lot of YouTube live streaming, he mentioned in a recent live stream that he's heard about the Bloodborne Remake Remaster being in development, and that's really all he said, nothing else. It was an hour-long live stream, but he just said it in passing for a few seconds, like 1 or 2 times. And then we had a Twitter account with a somewhat sizable following run off with this and act like it's confirmed, saying it's a big thing going to be revealed at the showcase, even providing a giant image of Bloodborne, which is basic marketing material that they felt the need to watermark. And then their follow-up tweet is asking for that precious, precious internet clout. And only on the third tweet, where it's further down and far less people saw this, is where they provide genuine context on who it was, what was said, and acting as though it's the same content of the original tweet. And then David Jaffe had to follow up on this, saying that, hey, I'm not an insider. I don't claim to be an insider. I was just talking about a reporter friend who told me about this, and she's reputable in the industry, and she's gotten things right before, so it was just something I knew about, and that's why I decided to say it. But I don't try and run off with these things as huge scoops or exclusive news stories, which, all things considered, we've got somebody that, okay, if that's the case, then why would you even say anything at all? Because you've got to certainly understand that based on your history in the business, people are going to use your name and run off with it and make stories, which they've done countless times already at this point. There's that, and then there's this Twitter account, which is, of course, being the absolute worst of the internet. So, it's just a lot of that, which leads us to pretty much nothing. Now, we can say David Jaffe, you don't have to like him, but he does know people. It's something where he's known about projects in the past that he has not said anything about, right? So he certainly does know things, but, it's not like you have to watch him like a hawk and see what he says, especially for the Bloodborne thing, which at this point, even I've done a few news stories in the past about this, but obviously nothing has really happened, which is why we're now staying quiet on it until something does happen. Now, it's been in my predictions videos for the past 2 years. I would love to see it happen, if only because then I would be right about it one time, but I mean, it's a great game, so of course it does deserve some kind of, at a minimum, proper PS5 port and also on PC, but we don't have anything substantial here, so for now I would say nothing here as usual, but who knows, maybe something will eventually come up. Moving on to some PlayStation Productions news. Well, actually a rumor first, because it seems like we might actually have an anime being adapted from a PlayStation property, if the anime news account is to be believed on Twitter, where they released a GIF of the PlayStation Studios animation. And when someone asked, if they're leaking games now, they say that it's a PlayStation game being adapted into an anime instead. Now, I can't speak on it because I don't follow the anime sphere too closely, but this account is known for teasing anime projects that were later confirmed. And on top of that, their partner account Sugoi Light retweeted this one saying, quote, "Skill issue, the animation," referring again to a video game adaptation, which that kind of tells us right away that maybe they're talking about Demon Souls or Bloodborne. Those are the only 2 Souls properties that Sony owns, but saying skill issue, like, okay, difficult game, so maybe it's that, which it would be hilarious if a Bloodborne anime happens before a native PS5 and PC port. But also you would like, why would Sony not do the anime and then the port at the same time? They obviously like to coincide these things if it can be helped. But I mean, the thing is, PlayStation Productions has also not shied away from venturing into older properties as well. I would consider Twisted Metal fairly old, same with Gravity Rush, which, that's getting a movie, so, it could be also a movie alongside an anime, which Gravity Rush already had a short form anime, but it could be older, it could be, Everybody's Golf got a somewhat recent entry, but it could be that, it could be Little Big Planet, maybe Ratchet and Clank. Sony owns hundreds of IP, so it could be a lot of things, but the skill issue thing makes us think that maybe it's like Bloodborne or Demon Souls, which would be funny, but yeah, I guess we'll have to keep our eyes on this one. Now, as for The Last of Us HBO, there's a few things going on here, like, for example, the average viewers per episode has reached $32 million, which is nuts. And also the show was named Best Show at the MTV Movie and TV Awards, so a little cool accolade there. But more notably is Variety reporting that season 2 is probably delayed because of the ongoing Writers Guild of America strike, with Craig Mazin himself on the picket line. So apparently the production was in the preparations for casting stage, having the actors come in and read lines directly from the second game since there's no script yet. But with that on hold, the hope is that season 2 can begin filming around early 2024 in Vancouver, which that was already what they were planning to do anyway, or at least the timeline was late 2023, early 2024. It does seem like it's likely unavoidable that the show is going to see a multi-week delay, possibly longer, depending on how long the strike goes for. And it's not unique to PlayStation Productions, although it certainly might be affecting this show and a few other things that are going on behind the scenes, because there's a lot of things we do know, but things that we don't know as well. So if they're in that, writing and creative stage, then they might be held up by that as well. But this is hitting so many productions across TV and film right now. So yeah, and it's also a very interesting time in that, well, if you're a creative in this field, that means you're... there's the looming threat of AI that's been advancing at a rapid pace. So this strike is a pretty important one. So I do hope there's a resolution soon that sees creatives justified in getting not only, more pay for what they do, but also validating their importance in this industry with AI being such a big threat. It's going to be a really weird year and a half coming up with how quickly it is advancing. Now, moving on to a very brief update for the Microsoft ABK deal. Reuters is reporting that this coming Monday, the 15th, the European Commission is expected, and I say that loosely, they're expected to approve the merger. Now, if they are going to announce it on Monday, which they have to do it soon anyway, I think the 22nd is the deadline, so whether it's Monday or not, it's going to be soon enough. But when they do announce the decision, this is going to be a very big deciding factor, or at least it should be, on if Microsoft is going to walk away or continue with the transaction. Because if the EU does surprise people and they deny it as well, then I would be shocked if Microsoft does not finally put this thing down and walk away from the deal where they're now facing 3 regulatory bodies denying it. That would be the US, the EU, and the UK. Now, if they approve it, then that means Microsoft, as they are right now, they are going to continue their appeal with the Competition Appeal Tribunal in the UK and fight it in the US with the FTC. So we should be finding out, in just a few days if Microsoft is going to walk away or continue. And even if the EU denies it, I'm not sure if they'll announce it right then and there or that day that they're going to walk away. Obviously, that's kind of a complicated process, but we're either going to be finding out if this is all over relatively soon, or we'll be finding out that this thing is not going to have a conclusion until 2024, which will be really exciting to see if that's going to be the case. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it's so easy. You can follow the link down below. Supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the news stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was looking at Layer on PlayStation 3, which I did not enjoy, but between that and the Haze video, thank you all so much for the kind words on that new series idea, which is a mix of my gameplay experience with a synopsis of the story and also a background on the developer, explaining the gameplay mechanics. So if you enjoy that, depends on the performance, but I think we will probably do more of them. I'm not sure how often because they take a while to put together, but yeah, I did not enjoy Layer at all. And a lot of you know I tend to be very positive, but it's not even something where I'm falling into that YouTube overly negative drive engagement sort of thing. I hated Layer. I didn't like it when I bought it day one. I did not like it by the time I finished it, but you can check out my experience. That was this past Tuesday. And as always, another Tuesday upload, but that's pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.